This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion.
What's the most you ever lost on a coin toss?
Sir?
The most you ever lost on a coin toss?
I don't know. I couldn't say.
Call it.
Call it.
Yes.
For what?
Just call it.
Well, we need to know what we're calling it for here.
You need to call it. I can't call it for you. Well, it wouldn't be fair.
I didn't put nothing up.
Yes, you did. You've been putting it up your whole life. You just didn't know it.
That's such a great clip from No Country for Old Men. If you've not seen that movie, go watch it. Just watch it. Just fantastic. And what he's really getting at, let's face it, he's forcing that old guy who's standing behind there at the cash register at the gas station. And that's the setup. You know, this kind of hitman-like character comes into the gas station, and that's just the interchange by him basically throwing a coin out there on the table. And this old guy at the the cash register, he doesn't know what's going on, but basically this hitman is sizing him up, and he's realizing that this man behind the cash register has led this boring life. Nothing's happened. He stood there and he's just done nothing. And now this crazy hitman is in front of him, challenging him to think outside the box. You don't know in the movie what happens next. You don't know whether he gets killed. You know, whether the hitman decides, this guy behind the cash register is just never going to break out, clearly, whatever. But it's a great scene. And it got me thinking today. And I put the text of that scene in my book, Trend Commandments. But it got me thinking about outside the box. So my last podcast was about entrepreneurship and being an entrepreneur. And this one's in a similar vein because it was very well received. But this is more specifically outside the box and specifically how I've approached things. And just a lot of different experiences that I was reflecting on. I was like, well, how did I get to the point where I literally get the hives if I'm standing in a crowd? Not because I've got some kind of social phobia or anything. I know, gosh, I love people. But I don't want to be with the sheep. I don't want to be in the middle of them. So I was thinking back, how far back in my life has this attitude manifested itself? And when did it spring? And so I was thinking probably 5th or 6th grade, there was a couple incidents, can't even talk today, where we had to make decisions as grade school kids. And one of the first decisions was what was going to be your, you had to do a report. I think this was 5th grade. You had to do a report, and you had to do like your first kind of paper, first research paper. And you had to choose an animal, And so what do most kids in 5th grade pick? Most kids are like, I'm going to pick a lion. I'm going to pick a bear. All this, you just realize, even when you're a fellow 5th grader, you're looking at these kids and you're realizing, my God, it's like sheep going to slaughter. I mean, they're just never going to make it. I picked a pig. I mean, seriously. I mean, I've ridden a pig, but, and I'm actually talking about the physical animal. But so what did I select? I selected the California condor in 5th grade. Like, what the hell was the California condor? There's only like 500 of them left or something. So it was this really kind of prehistoric looking animal, this obscure bird that was, an endangered species. So I'm thinking about this the other day. I'm thinking, okay, well, how many of these things can I reflect on that kind of kept me outside the box? And I remember, you'd have kids, the kid that picked the bear, the so-called popular kid. Oh, I got a bear. You got a California condor. What's wrong with you? And once again, you look at that kid and you just realize, man, it's going to be a really tough life, for a or, somebody washing sheets at the local motel, because you could just kind of see where they were going. You know what I mean? So I think it was sixth grade, I believe. Maybe I got these wrong. Maybe it was fifth. Anyways, I think it was sixth grade. In sixth grade, we had to do another report, and you had to pick a country this time. So, of course, everyone's picking like Australia or Great Britain, and so these, everyone's like terribly original, right? But at that time, look, if you're living in the United States of America and you're a sixth grade kid and you select Great Britain, you've never been there, I guess that sounds fairly novel. Okay, so what did I pick? Any guesses? Liechtenstein, some little, what is it, 10 miles? Some little obscure country in between, I believe it's between France and Switzerland. Now, and maybe this is fortuitous, I've not been to Liechtenstein yet, but it is a wealthy enclave, to say the least. So once again, all outside the box. And I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, God, this is actually a trend that now you're an adult. This didn't just start. And I don't necessarily know if I've got the motivation for the how or the why. So let me take it a step further. So it was right around the time of the 1980 election. And, we were going to have a mock debate, I think it was, or a mock election. And if people recall, the 1980 election actually had three candidates. The current president, Jimmy Carter, the Republican challenger, Ronald Reagan, and the independent, John Anderson. Of course, I was the independent John Anderson. I don't remember anything really about. I'd have to go back and look and see what views Anderson had. I don't know if he even had any kind of libertarian mindsets or not. I'd have to go back and look. But that was who I chose. That was who I chose to represent. So once again, this whole outside the box thinking, and is anybody else like that? Did anybody make these decisions early on as a kid where it's like, I can't, I know being part of the system is not going to reward me. I know it's not going to reward me. And if I spring forward about a decade or so, I was living in Fairfax County, Virginia, and early 20s, I think. And there was a lady who had been on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors for 30 years. Her name was Martha Panino. And Martha and I didn't really know each other, but we'd had some interactions, and I knew she respected me, even though I was just a young kid, and she was, gosh, she had to have been well over 70. And but she was the grand old dame of Fairfax County. I mean, this woman wielded serious power. I mentioned this in another podcast about Fairfax County, Virginia, but at the time, Fairfax County probably had a budget, a county, mind you, had a budget that exceeded the state budget of probably 6 to 8 states at the time. So we're talking serious wealth, 15 miles outside DC. And so anyways, I got involved in helping, because I had some interest in politics at the time. I got involved in helping the guy that was going to run against her. And he was like 40. She was like 70 or 75 or something. And her nickname was Mother Fairfax. That's how powerful this woman was. So and she had this huge bouffant hairdo and this like white mound of hair that almost looked like something from a crazy Hollywood getup or something like the Munsters or something. It was crazy. So anyways, that's painting the picture about who she was. So I was brought in to help this young upstart that was running against her named Bob, and I was put into opposition research. Now, going back, even growing up in my teens, I always had this feeling, and I developed this instinct for where to find how to look at things from outside the box, how to look at things from a different perspective, to realize that what you see, the propaganda that's been put in front of you, is not accurate. So how do you find accurate? How do you perceive accurate in developing instincts at an early age? And so what did I end up doing? Well, Fairfax County just built a huge government center, millions and millions of dollars spent on it. And I was told to go into the bowels of videotape at the time and find something that this woman, Martha Panino, had said about the government center that could be used in an election against her. And so she had put a comment in the paper. And now this woman talked with some pretty flowery language, okay? She was not a shrinking violet. She talked. And so there's a comment in the paper that says, we don't want to have a utilitarian-looking government center. And I'm thinking, what? Utilitarian-looking government center? She doesn't use that word. That's not what she said. Some reporter took what she said and changed it. I saw it in the paper, and I said, here I am in charge of opposition research. I saw it in the paper, and I said, that's not what she said. This whole government center was a huge bone of conflict. Everybody was pissed off that they had spent millions and millions of dollars to build this thing that they nicknamed the Taj Mahal, okay? So I needed to find out, what did she really say? Once again, outside the box, outside thinking. I knew I had to go look at the videotape. I had to go pull the tape. Now, this was before they were, and mind you, if you don't know this about local governments, they don't keep accurate records, okay? Local governments will go ahead, if there's a meeting, they'll record the minutes, they edit the minutes, then they approve the minutes. However, those are not the verbatim things that are said. So you actually have to go back and pull the audio tape or pull the videotape to find out what was actually said. They actually changed the freaking records, and it's really dishonest practice. I knew this, though, so I had the instinct. So I became to myself, okay, in the paper it says she just wants to, she doesn't want to have a utilitarian-looking building. So I go back and I find the videotape, right? And I'm sitting there by myself, buried in VHS tape in some government corner room. And she says, I'm watching the tape, and she says, the Japanese people have a saying, if you're going to have a teapot, you might as well have a beautiful teapot. That was what she really said. And they edited it out to get what I said before. So, of course, I'm like, man, this is great. This is great. My instincts, I'm kind of outside the box. This is how you think about it. So I go ahead, I write up a memo, I submit it to the campaign manager, never hear from them again. Don't hear anything. I'm thinking, well, whatever. I thought it was a great idea. This is really cool, man. I found this really great line. It's a major contradiction. It makes her look terrible. This is the way opposite. So like a day before the election, that teapot line, the Japanese people have a saying, if you're going to have a teapot, you might as well have a beautiful teapot. That was the primary line used in all of his marketing materials, the Challenger's marketing materials, the primary marketing line used in all of the marketing materials everywhere, and he won the election. Now, I'm not saying I want credit 20 years later, but he did go ahead and he was responsible once he was elected for approving so much of the major development in Fairfax County. Once again, I'm not taking credit for him approving all this. I'm just pointing out this weird, if you're awake to how the world works, you can see things. So why would I go into all of that about Fairfax County? Well, it's the same thought process with trend following. I apply the same type of outside the box thinking to get at the insights of how trend following really works. Look, I was at a mid-90s, right? Here I am. I'm trying to figure out, no one's telling me. I'm trying to figure out how all of these traders with all these track records that I'm examining, the Bill Dunns, the John Henrys, the Jerry Parkers, trying to figure out how this all pieces together. Right? So I'm at a conference in London and I'm sitting in a room. There's one guy speaking. There's like 3 other people in the room. Well, I recognized at the time, I believe it was the head of REFCO and the head of Dean Witter were sitting next to each other talking. It was one of these kinds of events where there could be, people like me, young guys with no connection to anything, and CEOs of major investment banks in the same room, maybe 4 or 5 of us in the same room. So I'm sitting there, and I knew by press accounts, obviously, that Barings Bank had just blown up in the last couple months. I knew John Henry had been making a lot of money, but the dots weren't really connected. You sit there and you hear two heads of two brokerage firms talking about who was on the other side of Barings and who could it be. And there was only one member of the board of directors of the Futures Industry Association that it could possibly be. If I wasn't sitting there, awake, attentive, piecing things together, I never would have been able to piece together that John Henry was on the other side of Barings Bank. Once again, outside the box, being at the right place, putting yourself in the right place, being awake, being alive to something that might happen. And that was the nexus of my trend following book, because that was the piece of information that really nobody else was willing to talk about. Putting that together, putting that story together was the foundational thread. It allowed me to then start to realize, oh my gosh, what happened during long-term capital management? Oh, same process. So it was the light bulb moment, as Jake would say.
Do you see the light? What light? Have you seen the light? Yes! Yes! Jesus H. Goddamn Christ! I have seen the light!
It was and isn't that a great clip? That's such a great clip, right? That's a fantastic clip. The Blues Brothers, fantastic. But seriously, that light bulb moment, that was just another way of looking at information, pulling the pieces together. But in some ways, it goes back to when I was a kid, making choices that were outside the box, thinking differently, not just going with the crowd. I mean, this is the hard thing about being a trend following trader. If there is something hard, is that you have to be comfortable being alone. You have to be comfortable being by yourself. You can't just necessarily have this mandate that you must be sitting there in some kumbaya circle holding hands with a bunch of other folks that look like they just left a Dead concert 5 minutes ago and the Dead have been around for 20 years. I mean, that's what you've got to avoid, right? I mean, the trick, if there was ever a trick, it's outside the box. It's not just what you've been indoctrinated into. It's outside the box. I've been thinking, how do I get more of you involved in this process? I don't have the perfect plan yet, but I look at myself as a leader of a movement. Yes, we're all some kind of weird trend following cult. No, seriously. I will help lead a movement. And I know there's a lot of other people. I see it on Facebook in particular. And if you haven't joined me on Facebook yet, please do. But I see it on Facebook. There's a lot of very, very bright people with some very strong views on trend following. So I'm not the only person by any stretch that's participating and adding thought. There's a lot of people. However, to get a larger megaphone that we could all use to kind of spread this gospel, I can use help. And I'll tell you where I can use some immediate help. Reviews. Believe it or not, the way this crazy world system works, reviews are important. Reviews add muscle to the message. Where do I want reviews for? First and foremost, if you like the podcast, go review it on iTunes. Apparently, I've come to understand that the reviews on the podcast play an integral part of how much Apple features the podcast. And my podcast on Apple, on iTunes, has been driving a lot of listeners. Let's keep that message going. So if you have not written a review, and it won't take you long, I promise. And if you want me to keep doing these podcasts, if you want me to keep talking to interesting people, you've got to do something yourself too, besides listen. I'm sorry, there's a cost to this. You can also write a check. You can also buy something. I'm not joking. I'm a capitalist. I want money just like you. It's the way it works. I got to pay the bills. I got to pay the bills to keep paying to make the podcast go so everyone can listen. That's the way it works. So seriously, go onto iTunes, write a review. First 10 people that write a review on iTunes, I'll send a copy of my little book of trading. And if you're the 11th through the 20th, well, at least you'll keep getting free podcasts. You might not get a free book, but you'll keep getting free podcasts. Amazon too. Let's get some reviews on these books. If you like my books, if you want me to keep writing interesting books, if you want me to keep interviewing interesting people, you got to get in there and whip it around. You got to get in there and smack some of these trolls in the head. You know, some of these folks that don't know what they're talking about. Give them a smack around, beat them up a little. Let's get this discussion going. Let's make it. Listen, you gotta pound a little. You just can't be a consumer. You gotta produce. And look, I'm going to keep this. The podcasts are not about to stop. So, and I know I've got most of July booked already in terms of guests, but August is going to be coming up pretty quick. And oh, by the way, speaking of July and August, speaking events, two things. I will be speaking for Agora in Vancouver in late July. Pretty big deal. They put a really big show together. We're talking 1,000+ people that I'm going to have to stand up on stage in front of and not screw up and say something that keeps them from not running out of the room. But a really good group of people that come and speak at this. I'm pretty sure on the docket this year, other speakers include Mark Faber, Barry Ritholtz. So it should be really interesting. If you're up in the Northwest area, you should probably grab a ticket and come check it out. Not just to see me, but it's a pretty interesting gig. There's a lot of interesting people there. Second, I'm hoping, I've got the invite, but they've been a little flighty, to be speaking in Shanghai and Beijing in August. So I hope that materializes. I definitely can use something like a random Chinese event to just go, really get the juices flowing. So to sum up, reviews. If you like the podcast, go on iTunes, write some reviews. If you like the books, go on Amazon, battle the trolls. Let's go. Let's get some reviews up.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.